Does Magyar's result indicate the decline of Fidesz and Prime Minister Orban? And what of the rotating council presidency by Hungary in July? Will Viktor Orban be a neutral power broker or use the limelight to stall Brussels policy? Now we're here joined by Zoltán Fehér to discuss more of what is happening in Hungary and what will Hungary's role in Brussels be. Good evening and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good evening or good afternoon here in Washington, D.C.
Great to have you with us. So there's a lot happening for Hungary at the moment. We have Péter Magyar, who is now gaining the limelight. He's making the headlines. What do you make of what is being said of him in the media and perhaps perhaps his increasing role in Brussels, shall we say, or what we expect to see of him in Brussels?
Yes, there's a political earthquake happening in Hungary as the result of the European Parliament elections on June 9th, a little over a week ago. As you rightly mentioned, Orban's Fidesz governing party had its it's actually had its worst performance in a decade. In any elections. It lost about 8 to 10% of its support compared to the general elections in 2022. As concerns Péter Magyar and his Tisza party, they're 30%, which is the highest percentage of any opposition party in the past 2 decades. Is a very good showing, and it's very surprising because this party and Magyar himself emerged on the scene a couple of months ago. The party is only 2 months old. We've never had in Hungarian politics a party go from 0 to 30% in 2 months, so this is quite extraordinary. And adding to Tisza parties and Péter Magyar's successes is their acceptance into the European Parliamentary Group of the European People's Party yesterday.
Zoltán, on that, we also have interesting development, and I agree that the rise of Péter Magyar is very interesting in the last months, and indeed those 7 seats out of Hungary's 21 seats in the European Parliament, Fidesz still managed to clinch, I think, 11, but nevertheless, it's a huge step. Also, as you said, the EPP now welcoming, and I think quite a snub to Mr. Orban, because it was very much Orban's Fidesz yes, who was kicked out of the EPP in 2021. But on that, we also have Péter Magyar saying to journalists, I believe this was very recent, in the last 24 hours, that I'm quoting here, "We will not send troops or weapons to Ukraine from Hungary. You know the sensitive situation of Hungary in that war." So. I mean, this is a bit of a now shake because we have the EPP, the biggest grouping across Europe in the European Parliament, very much stalwart supporters of Ukraine. Now, the hope was, Mr. Magyar comes in and supports a different course of action in Hungary. So what do we make of his statement here? Is this now, concerning the EPP at all? Does this mean that, he's standing for something else, or how do you interpret his words?
What you and the viewers need to understand is that Prime Minister Viktor Orban and his Fidesz party have created a situation in Hungary where no politician who wants to be successful in any elections can come out and say that they want to send troops or give money to Ukraine's war efforts in fighting back the aggression from Russia. So it is impossible for any opposition party, including Tisza party and Péter Magyar, to come out and say, well, we want to send troops, we want to train troops in Hungary, we want to send weapons. The situation in the Hungarian electorate's mind has already been set. That said, I do not see Péter Magyar and the Tisza party oppose the EPP's policy on Ukraine. I believe that they will find a good balance between catering to their constituency in Hungary, which has, again, clearly been conditioned to oppose Hungary's deeper involvement in the Ukraine war on the side of Ukraine, and EPP's position that the European Union needs to do its utmost to support Ukraine. Again, let's not forget the European Union does not have arms to send, does not arm Ukraine itself. NATO helps in that way, and obviously Hungary is part of NATO. So that's another question.
With the European, if I can just interject there for a minute, with the European Peace Facility,
yes,
that is changing. So, I mean, we do have, for the first time, the European Union very much doing more than it used to, and that does include certain arms deliveries directly, which I think why this is so controversial, in particular for Hungary. So, but I mean, it's not at the same level, of course, as NATO nation. So I just want to make that point.
Not at the same level. The EU, through its member states, wants to increase its support, but I think Tisza party will find the best way to manage that contradiction, and I believe that overall they will go with the EPP's stance on EU support for Ukraine.
I wanted to just press you a little further on Péter Magyar, and obviously he originally didn't intend to go to Brussels. He was very much focused on domestic politics in Hungary. But obviously the tide is changing a little bit. And as you mentioned, the support for the opposition party has soared in a very short period of time. Can you tell us a little bit about what is happening in Hungary and what this is symptomatic of?
Sure. Tisza party's and Péter Magyar's entrance onto the political scene is quite a shock and surprise even to their own voters and to the Hungarian public. But its background is to be found in the government's and Orban's Fidesz party's increasing problems and concerns. First of all, the economy has not been doing very well. There's been rampant inflation for the past 2 years, much higher inflation than in most of Europe and around the world. The government has been shaken by a scandal about child protection, which actually the government made a central part of its agenda. And Péter Magyar, who was married to the Minister of Justice, who had to resign as the result of the pedophilia scandal, he had already been divorced from the former justice minister, but he came forward as a former insider of Fidesz's regime. And that's how he entered the scene in February. And in a very short time, again, because of growing dissatisfaction in the Hungarian public with the government's policies, he managed to become very popular and create a new party, Tisza party, which has now seized 30% of the votes in the European Parliament elections. And we can say that by that, they destroyed the so-called old opposition, mostly consisting of left-wing and liberal parties, which did a terrible showing at the EP elections. And now we can say that Tisza party is clearly the leader of the opposition. And they do have a chance, if they play their cards well, to be a serious challenger to Orban's Fidesz party in the elections, general elections in 2 years, in 2026.
Zoltán, we're running out of time, unfortunately, but I do want to just get a very brief closing comment on you, because, I mean, we're getting also the rotating council presidency of Hungary. We have a slogan. We have a Rubik's Cube. What do you make of Viktor Orban's place there at the top table? Is this going to be difficult for the European Union? Is it going to be not as bad as we think? What do you make of it? Just briefly, very closing comment there.
The EU presidency does not give the country holding this status very wide opportunities to shape the substantial agenda of the European Union. That said, I believe Orban's government, as the presidency of the European Union as of 1st of July, will do everything to push its own agenda against support for Ukraine, doing the bidding for Russia and China as best as they will be able to.
Yeah, and I think first signs will be on the 25th of June, I think, still, where we'll see if those accession negotiations will continue. The framework agreement has been closed, but I think there's still, I think, some fears that Hungary might complicate the process. We'll have to cover that when we get there. We'll close it there.
I'm pretty sure that Hungary will try to do that during the presidency.
All right. Or we'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much, Zoltán Fehér. Thank you. Appreciate all that insight today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.